And a very good evening to you, and welcome to Politics 101. David Hines here. It's a Wednesday evening. It's good to be alive, and it's good to be Guyanese, good to be part of the Caribbean family. It's good to be part of the progressive family as far as politics are concerned. I would like to see us within the context of progressive politics, and by progressive politics, I mean politics that are concerned with fundamental social and political change, social and political transformation. A lot has been happening. A lot has been happening in recent times. A lot of discussion of where politics are. The cricket, the CPL there, and the large crowds that turn out for the CPL has caused some to talk about the relationship of cricket to race in Guyana. And it has caused me to begin to think about where we are as a country. We do that every day, of course. We look at events as they unfold. But I want us to begin tonight to look at a panoramic view of where we are. We are 2 years and more since the last election. And every day we try to make sense of the developments in the country. And sometimes we look at it, we looked at those developments in the particular context, in their immediate context, and not in the larger context. So we often don't have a sense of exactly why these things are happening, why the political actors are behaving in the way they behave. And I don't think people themselves, in terms of ordinary supporters of the political parties themselves, grasp that they are part of an unfolding in our society that is quite profound. That is quite profound. So we want to talk about that tonight. I have two gentlemen who are going to help me to walk it through. One, of course, you all know, Brother Kedaki Amsterdam, you all know very well, and Brother Takumo Ugunse, who you know also, but he's not on as often as Kedaki is. And I'm being somewhat biased tonight because these are both WPA members. They're my brothers, political brothers, and I want us to come at it from that perspective, and I'm going to explain why. Let me just welcome everyone down to Politics 101. Last night, we couldn't come on PAMS TV platform, but some of you were able to migrate over to Politics 101 and YouTube, and we got a sizable audience. But tonight we're back. So those of you who are accustomed to joining us from PAMS TV platform, we're back. Tonight, as I said, we are going a little bit hard in the sense that we are not looking at individual events. We are trying to look at the panoramic view and try to answer some political questions that I think it's important that we answer. Welcome down if you're joining us from Guyana in quarantine. If you join us from West Berbice, the east coast of Demerara, of course, welcome. Welcome to all of you from Georgetown. From Georgetown, the capital city. I was looking at a program where the mayor and the deputy mayor were on the Gildari Freddie Kissoon show last night, 2 nights ago on Monday night. And I looked at the 4 gentlemen sitting there having this discussion, and the mayor and the deputy mayor are trying to explain the crisis that the city finds itself in, and to try to put it within the context of a political system where the political party that's in power at the central government uses the power of the central government to squeeze the municipalities that are not controlled by that party. It's simple, everybody knows it. When you look at the two who are sitting there and avoiding that question totally, And the mayor, the deputy mayor, are trying to explain, look, we are not able to do the things because the purse strings are controlled by the government. And that the taxes that we are supposed to get, most of it come from big government and big business and the government themselves. And big business is not paying taxes. Partly because the building code has not been upgraded. So people been paying a certain tax when they had a little 1-bedroom building. And now they get a 40-room building and they're paying the same tax. And the mayor and the deputy mayor, I have to get both of them. And a deputy mayor should have been on this program months ago. I met him at a function. He gave me his card and said he would like to come on to Politics 101 to talk. And I haven't gotten around, but I will bring them on. But it's not rocket science why Georgetown is in the state that it's in. Georgetown is a victim of our party politics, our divisive party politics, our bad-minded party politics, political domination. And the hosts are sitting there as if they don't know that. They don't know that. And that is why we have to have programs like these that are not afraid to say the reason things are as bad as they are is because of the party politics. You have some people who are saying, oh, Irfan is a good guy. He goes up on stage and he dances. He's a wonderful guy. They don't say it, but they're trying to say he's not like Jack Dio. This is a new PPP man. And the next breath, they complain about the oil contract. And the next breath, they complain about Georgetown being nasty. And the next breath, they complain about how poor people can't buy things in the market. Are you all not seeing the link in those things and Irfan Ali? You're divorcing Irfan Ali. If he's doing well, then these problems should not be there. Your contract should have been renegotiated, and Guyana should have gotten $50 million signing bonus. If he's such a good guy, then you all shouldn't be paying plenty money for things in the market. It's a part of our political culture where we know the problems and we try to delink our political leaderships from the problem. Welcome down to Politics 101. If you're joining us from the Caribbean, please share the link. You're joining us from further afield in the diaspora. I don't consider the Caribbean diaspora. We're family. Those Guyanese who are in the Caribbean, you're home. You're home. If you're a little bit further afield, you're in the diaspora. I know the people of Brooklyn will say, Brooklyn is not the diaspora. Brooklyn is Region 11. You know, there was a boy growing up who used to say, Brooklyn is like where you go from Buxton to Annandale, meaning Buxton to Annandale next door. Because often something happens in the village and people in Brooklyn know about what's going on there. But anyhow, good night. Welcome to Politics 101. Welcome to Maryland, Virginia, Washington, D.C. I know we have some loyal viewers from there. Loyal viewers in New Jersey, Antigua. Ralph, good night from Antigua and Barbuda. Lots of our people are there in Antigua. Welcome down to Politics 101. As I said tonight, we're going to be looking at politics in its larger sense. The 2020 election. A lot has happened since the 2020 election, and we've been trying to make sense of it. And because we're constantly inundated on a daily basis with developments, political developments, sometimes we lose sight of the big picture. 2020, the 2020 election was one of those decisive elections. One may say that, well, all elections are decisive. Well, no, some are more decisive than others. The election of 1953, the very first election under adult suffrage, for the first time, our people are voting for limited self-government. For the first time, adults, all adults are voting. And what are they voting for? It's the period of decolonization. The colonials have signaled that they are going. And we are going to have to paddle our canoe on our own. And the basic question in 1953 was, who will govern when the colonials go? And that election then became more than an election. It became a moment in our history. It wasn't surprising that the government that came out of that election lasted for 130 days. It wasn't surprising that Britain sent troops into Guyana to invade Guyana. It wasn't surprising that the party, the elected party with a majority in parliament, the original PPP with Jagan Burnham, Quayana, Janet Jagan, Ashton Chase, Lakshman Singh, all of them were together. It wasn't surprising that after that election, that party split. And the party split meant there was what? An ethnic split. The election was more than an election. And the consequences are far-reaching effects that are with us to today, up to today. That one election led to the invasion of Guyana by one of the powerful countries in the world at the origin of another powerful country, the United States. The government lasted 133 days, kicked out of office. The United Party split in two. A consequential election. The Constitution was suspended. Leaders were locked up. Here, Link, we're talking it real here tonight. We're talking it here real tonight to beat back the narrative of 2020. Of course, by the time we got to 1961, and the 1961 is coming, independence is around the corner. The 1961 election became consequential. After that election, what happened? 3 years of race riots, 1961 to 1964. We had the collision of communism, fear of communism in Guyana. That was in 1953. This time the British and Americans didn't send troops, but they sent intelligence undercover people. Again, we had the ethnic groups at each other's throat. This time they just didn't split. They fought for 3 years. Now we come to 2020. And some people are telling us 2020 was about an attempt to rig an election. Oh, please. 2020 was much more profound than that. Again, the collision of our ethnic problems, our political problems, and geopolitics. combining again in 2020. Out of 1961 came the PNC US. Out of 2020 came the PPP government. What was present in 2020 that wasn't present in the elections that I mentioned before is that we now have black gold, oil. Wars have been fought and are still being fought over oil. Wars. Countries, governments have been toppled over oil. So with oil, ethnic divisions, political divisions, geopolitics, the 2020 election was more than an election. Some people, oh, we saved democracy. What democracy did you save? 2020 has imperiled Guyana's democracy more than ever. What democracy? But narratives, narratives, narratives. People like myself are caught in all of this. Some of you have asked, why is the PPP and its acolytes, why are they going after you, Dr. Hines? Why are they going after the WPA? They admit, they say that you all are powerless. You all don't have followers. Why are they going after you? You turn on the Freddie Kissoon show, and there's not a show that they don't mention my name or the WPA members. And the question is why? It has little to do with me. Well, it doesn't. Let me take that back because I may be too generous there. It's much more than me, the individual. It's much more than the party, the WPA. It is what we are, what we have represented in Guyana, and what we continue to represent. And we will continue to represent that, whether we have 1 member or 1 million members. You can't take that away. You see, when there was the split in the 1950s, the Indianist tendency went with Jagan's PPP. The Africanist tendency went with the PNC. There was a non-electoral independent tendency that emerged that we scholars have not paid enough attention to. And that the independent, non-electoral tendency, pioneered by Sidney King, UC Guyana. When the PPP split, he did not go with Burnham, he stayed with Jagan. When Jagan refused to take Guyana into the West Indies Federation, he broke with Jagan. He joined the PNC. When he raised the question of looming ethnic conflict and the need to solve it, he was kicked out of the PNC, 1961. Guyana therefore represented that independent tendency that when the country is in trouble and you can't solve the country problem, you can't solve those problems through elections, you have to turn somewhere else. And that's where the Guyana tendency began. the independent strand in our modern politics. That is not necessarily electoral, that deals with the fundamental problems. It is not an accident that when African Guyanese found themselves in trouble culturally, it was the Guyana tendency with the cultural revolution that lifted African Guyanese to a position of dignity. Yes, African Guyanese had political power because the PNC was in power, but they lacked a cultural standing in the society. And it was the independent tendency by Guyana that gave them that. We know that the Askria went on to be part of the WPA, and the WPA started out first, as all independent groups do, started out dealing with the fundamental problems in the society. And then the logic took it to electoral politics, reluctantly so. But there is a way in which the history carries with it all political parties. And that's the tendency that I come from. And both sides always would like that tendency to validate what they're doing. The anger that you all see from the PPP and their supporters and all those who are talking about saving democracy is that they badly wanted voices like mine. They badly wanted the WPA to say what they're saying. And we said it. They would have looked at African Guyanese and said, don't worry with the rest of them. Look at real Africanists, Guyana, Ogunse, Hines, Kentucky, Amsterdam. They say the elections were rigged. They badly wanted our validation. And because we deny them that validation, we are the devil. I'm laying it out for you all here tonight. That's why the anger. My brother Naim Chan, who said when he looked at cricketers hugging, he thinks about me, David Hines, unbugging racial unity. Me, David Hines, unbugging racial unity. So if you kill David Hines, you get racial unity tomorrow. If you kill WPA, you get racial unity. That's the logic. We are unbugging racial unity. You know, I'm saying nothing today about Black people that I didn't say before 2020. I'm wearing the shishi like I wore it before 2020. But before 2020, you see, I was criticizing the Black-led government. Today, I am criticizing the Indian-led government. There's been a fundamental shift in our politics from 2020. There's been a realignment. The majority of our Indian Guyanese brothers and sisters are towing the line that there was an attempt to rig the election and overthrow democracy. And the majority of our African Guyanese brothers and sisters are saying, thanks to the recount, we have found out that the PPP rigged the election, not attempt to. They actually rigged the election. Those are the two narratives. My friend Naim, if what Freddie Kissoon is saying is true, says he was standing up for democracy. So he think there was rigging at Ashmin, And he had to stand up against that for democracy. And he doesn't look over to his neighbor and hear his neighbor say, they're going and find 47 bucks without papers. They find people who vote and wasn't in the country. He doesn't hear that. Isn't that democracy too? Doesn't the other side have a right to claim that democracy from their standpoint was plundered in 2020? So both sides are saying it was plundered. But if you listen to these fellows, it's only one narrative. And part of the anger with me and people like me is that we are saying, wait a minute, there are two narratives. I have not declared the election yet. Never. I have not one day said the PPP win or the coalition won. Never. Never. I don't know. I don't think either of them won. But what is clear is that the PPP attempted to throw the PNC under the bus, as Henry Jeffrey said last night. And the PNC said, all right, you're attempting to throw me, I will throw you under the bus. Before that, both parties will make noise about rigged election. But they would go on, they would move on. In 2020, neither of them moved on. And what the PPP people cannot come to grips with is that they try to say the other side rig and the other, or attempt to rig, and the other side actually show them rigging. That is what we're dealing with. And they're covering it over with democracy. Saving democracy. And so the 2020 election had to be decided not by the Guyanese people. It had to be decided by external forces that use the weapon of sanctions, among other things, to put pressure on the institutions of Guyana to settle the election one way. But as happened, you settle it on that day, the election is still continued. The election is still continuing. The court, day before yesterday, the PPP tried to tell the court, you can't hear a petition because the other side 19 months ago didn't tell you, hurry up. And the court had to tell the PPP, oh man, you telling the court that if somebody come, if an organization come before us, making a charge, that we must chase them away because the charges were not urged upon us? The elections are still going on. These elections will never be settled. I wanted to give you all that context. I'm going to bring in my brothers now so that we can discuss. Good evening, Brother Kinaki.
Good evening, Dr. Hines. Good evening, viewers. Thank you for having me tonight.
Good evening, Brother Takuma.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Hines, for having me after a long time.
Yes. We managed to solve the technological trick here. So you're now hijacked, so to speak. So you'll be on quite often, brothers. I tried in my long opening there, to lay the context for the beginning of this discourse. I'm less interested tonight in the individual things that has happened, what the PPP do and the PNC do. We deal with that every day. I want this conversation tonight to go to a larger understanding of the undertones and overtones. I like to tell my students, you look at a body of information, you read a book, you look at a documentary, and you answer the question, what does it tell you about the subject? Our subject, Mr. Amsterdam, tonight is Guyana. And I'm raising the question here about the 2020 election and what it says about this little place, 83,000 square mile post-plantation society, a set of people brought and dumped here, a place where we never became a nation. We could not become a nation. We cannot become a nation. The circumstances under which we were militate against shared nationhood. One may say it's a troubled place. And we have this oil, and we have this election. But Ogunsi, I'm not asking a question. You've heard me. As they say in theater, take it away.
I agree with you, David, that the 2020 elections, and I think even before we actually had arrived at the election date, all the commentators were telling us that the 2020 election is going to be the mother of all elections in Guyana. And by that, what they meant is that these elections would be elections that will be fought, and the consequences of these elections will be unprecedented in the history of the country. So 2020 election was a major elections because all the troubles that we had from slavery, indenture throughout the colonial period all come together in these 2020 elections. The African community today can't separate itself from the damage it received during the period of slavery and colonialism. We were deprived of over 200 years of collective wealth. And we, as a community, helped to build and fashion Guyana without receiving a cent. And if you look at all of the arguments in our early history, when the Europeans introduced indenture, Indian indenture and Portuguese indenture, the discourse from the African community was that we are being taxed to pay to bring people to undercut our interests. And we saw by the time we reached the 50s, we saw that the population issue had become an issue where up to that point, there were more Indians into the country, okay, in a manner that was unprecedented, that threatens in electoral terms, the African position. I raise this to say that even long before 2020, these fundamental political, economic, and social issues, we were trying to grapple with it. And as you took us through the whole period of all the various elections. And even before we reached 2020, we must admit as a nation, we have failed, okay, to address the historical challenges that are forced upon us by the logic of our history. And we embrace a winner-take-all political system, which not only act against African interests, but it also reduced the Amerindians, okay, to political nothingness. When objectively, as a people who have experienced colonialism, both African, Indians, Amerindians, all Guyanese should have developed a political doctrine or a political ideology that seek to repair the historical damages, okay, and to arrive at a society that is more just and more fair. But we know that that was not 100% in our hands. The external forces manipulate the situation to make sure that they were in control, and they have trained sufficient among the Guyanese in the various institutions to replace them and to act in the way that the colonial powers, wish them to act. And it is that the totality of the internal weaknesses and the external pressures that created a condition where as Guyanese we were never ever able to address the historical challenges forced upon us by history. So we enter 2020 elections where we already had problems. By the time we reach 2020 elections, if you look at the Guyanese economy, everybody would tell you that by 2020 elections, the African and Amerindians probably together only own 10 or 12% of the economy. The rest of the economy is owned outside the African and outside the Amerindian community. The Indians, the Portuguese, and the Europeans. And now we got to extend the Chinese. Now those are profound structural problems, because the livelihood of any ethnic group depend upon their standing in the economic system, whatever that economic system is, whether it's socialist, capitalist, or what. And I'm saying that when oil add to the equation in 2020, all the ethnic groups in this country, and particularly two major ethnic groups, were clear that he who gets his hands on oil, given the winner-take-all political system, will be able to dominate the country for a very long time. At least that was the view of each side, both its leadership and its followership. And that is what clashed, in 2020, to make the elections not an elections, but a do-and-die power, do-or-die struggle, over which ethnic group will control this oil money, and which ethnic group will be able to guarantee its political survival for a very long time. And of course, you had the external dimensions, which is always present. The Americans had the geopolitical interests, the Venezuelan issues, and so forth and so forth, and all of that played into the equation. And I must join you, because we, the WPA, and myself, I have never called a winner in the elections. The WPA, as far as I know, I've never called a winner in the elections. And from speaking for myself, long before we reach a resolution of the elections, I have been insisting and saying that the elections are too corrupt to deliver an acceptable government. And what should come out of these elections is a power sharing arrangement, at least for some 2 years or 3 years before we go back to another elections. But of course, once the Americans opened the door for the PPP wasn't interested in that. And the African political leadership was so weak that instead of they call the American bluff and to stand up and defend their constituency, knowing very well that once you allow power to move to the PPP in the context of the 2020 elections, and with the context of them having the blessings of the Americans, you're creating a situation for the African community, yourself, and the country, that will be extremely difficult to reverse. And I think that as we criticize the PPP, we have to criticize our own leadership, which ought to have stand up and realize the historical significance of this juncture in these elections and defend its constituency, and saying out of an elections which I am not certain who win, I am not claiming victory, but I'm saying the solution have to be shared governance. We got to share the power.
Brother Tukumo Ogunse there, a couple of people here in the audience are saying, this reminds me of the old days of WPA meeting with Walter Rodney and Clive Thomas and Kwayan and Moses Bagwan. Must be a person who was around a long time. Kidaki Amsterdam, you are a generation below Ogun and myself. You have heard us here. You are engaged in the day-to-day rough and tumble of trying to deal with the political developments as they unfold. Here's your chance, right, to put all of that in a large context. The 2020 election in its macro context, in its overriding and overpowering context.
Thank you, Dr. Hines. I like to say I'm not a student of, I'm not a historian, but to a large extent, a lover of history. I like to go way back in time. I'm happy that you and OG actually took us through the journey. But I believe when we're discussing the 2020 elections, we must, to some extent, go right back to 1992. Notably, today is the 5th of October. They say the 5th of October 1992 saw the return of democracy to Guyana. I always argue that that's a farce. Because just what took place the 5th of October 1992 and allowed the PPP to be in power for 23 years and to do as they like is what took place in the 2020 elections. The 2020 elections, however, magnified the problems that this society faced under the PPP government. 2020 elections magnified those problems because, first and foremost, the machinations were more blatant. The rigging was more blatant. But more than the rigging, the support of the international community of the PPP as a group, as against the APNU. Some will argue the PPP as a people, representative of the Indo community in this country for the larger part, as against the APNU, which represents the Afro community. That support of the international community opened up what many of us refer to as Pandora's box to the Guyanese society. Because now, not only did they get the backings of the international community like they did in 1992 to rig an election, but having rigged that election, the PPP now has unfettered access to capital, financial capital that this country has never seen before. And when you bring the two together, when the two are combined in the international support and the access to this kind of capital, what we have is a society that is, in my mind, on the brink of some kind of explosion, because the PPP is not considerate, is not afraid of the domination that it sought from 1992 to present. And so what we're seeing in this society is excesses perhaps that we've never seen before. We're seeing the building, the facilitating of the establishment of paramilitary groups. We're seeing the pushing of one set of people to the periphery of the nation, the biased distribution of resources that in the long run, exacerbate a problem which existed.
Exacerbate the problem which existed, Kidaki.
That problem is, in short, the widening of income gaps among certain groups, the domination of certain groups in the society. And that domination is not just about economic domination, but it's a kind of domination which has affected the entire structure of the Guyanese society. The courts are impacted, the judicial system is impacted, social services are impacted. And so what like I said, what we have now is a society that perhaps is on the brink of some kind of explosion, because, as people say, it is becoming overbearing. And if you're looking for the evidence of these things, just last week, you had a situation where the courts, an officer of the court, decided, listen, this individual, a judicial officer, if that's the correct term, is disrespectful to the court, and the court will act as it has the right to. And the magistrate handed down a ruling that says this special prosecutor will be held in contempt. Before the ink dried, as some of us will say, a request came from the DPP, remove this magistrate from this case. Right? Remove this magistrate from this case. And many might see it as just the DPP playing a political hand, or the DPP trying to protect the prosecutor. But that points to deeper issues in the society. And that is in the quest for domination, supported by external forces and bolstered by the access to capital. The people who sit in power right now do not care about law and order for the society. And as they continue to push forward with this uncaring attitude, citizens, I dare say, are going to, at some point in time, adopt the same attitude. And what we're going to have is a big conflagration, as the countryman Prophet Wills would say.
Thank you very much, Brother Kidaki Amsterdam. We're trying to put our politics, our society in larger context, and Kidaki commented there from his perspective. In my introduction, I tried to locate the WPA and our politics in the context of the evolution of the society. And I made the point, for those of you who are just joining us, that the PPP's problem with us in the WPA is that they did not get the validation from our party for the narrative that they have spun at the last election. And they have placed us as African racists. Now, if you are young and you don't know our recent history, you will say, well, yeah, I mean, these apps are talking a lot about African, a lot about Black people, and so on. What you would not know is that our party started out as a coming together of Indian forces led by the Indian People's Revolutionary Associates, led by Moses Bhagwan, the African forces led by Astoria and Iyushi Kwayana, and the intelligentsia or the educated people at UG led by Clive Thomas and Dasram Sami and others. It was those three forces, intelligentsia, the radical Indian section of the population, and the radical African section of the population that created WPA. Now, we called ourselves a multiracial party, and people are saying that we're no longer multiracial because we're defending Black people. No, multiracialism is not an ideology. It's not an ideology. It's a method of mobilization. What it means is that you're mobilizing African and Indians together. Young people talk about multiracialism as though it's some ideology. There are Marxists who believe in multiracialism. There are liberals who believe in multiracialism. Marxism, liberalism, those are ideologies. Multiracialism is not an ideology. It is a method of mobilization. When we mobilized Africans and Indians in the 70s and the 80s, there were African and Indians who mobilized at that time. Today, because of power, because of the way in which our ethnic politics have evolved, Our Indian Guyanese brothers and sisters have taken shelter under the PPP. I don't think all of them agree with the PPP, but that's where the politics have driven us. So if the politics have driven people who were angry with the PPP, you have the Ravi Devs, you have the Adikisum, they represent tendencies in the Indian community. You have all the eye of the PPP. You have the young Turks in the PPP. You have the Indian business elements. They don't all agree on many things. But there must be something that they all agree on, that they all sit under that tent. They all sit under that tent. I am not cursing Indians for going there, but we have to be honest with ourselves. So when you look at people like myself, who come out of that multiracial mobilization, and here I am after 2020, saying, I am defending the interests of Black people. You have to see it in the same way as the flow of politics has taken all those elements in the Indian community under the tent of the people. You have to understand where the flow of politics has taken somebody like myself and Brother Ogun and Brother Kidaki. African people are the first people who fought for 200 and odd years against white domination. We fought 200 and odd years. We are the pioneers. African people are the pioneers of resistance, anti-colonial resistance, anti-imperialist resistance. Then the origins of the modern political economy is African, it's our labor. It's our labor. And after slavery, it's the creation of the villages. We must not be afraid to say that. It is not, doesn't mean that Black people are better or Black people should get some special privilege. That's history. African people, African Guyanese, are the first ones to have fought white external domination. African Guyanese, by virtue of their location on the plantation, it is their labor that has become the bedrock of the modern Guyanese political economy. And when you look today, that people are treating African Guyanese as some arithmetic, 30% of the population, they can be crossed over, they can be bought, throwing crumbs at them, getting them dancing for you, going on. When a child of that history, like myself and my two brothers here, children of that proud history, when we see that, we first cry. And after we finish crying, we say that we come from that seed, and that seed is under siege. Where should our energies go? And so therefore, it is not racism that drives me, that drives Brother Ogun, that drives Brother Kidaki. It's a sense of racial equality, which we have been the pioneers of, African Guyanese. And we must speak that history. And the people who once lifted this country on its shoulders, you're today treating them like cavemen and cavewomen, and you expect that those of us who they've sent to school, who they've given the opportunity to read some books and to travel and to study, that we must stand by and allow you to do it. Because we're afraid that you call us racist. But Ogun, you've been in the African thing long before me. Long before me. Go ahead.
Okay, one of the distinguishing things about the race discourse in Guyana, on the African side, from the days of Burnham right on to the present, we have been saying wherever we find ourselves, whether I find myself in AGDA, whether I find myself in WPA, whether I write as an individual, we have been making it clear that while we support African interests, we are against African domination. And we have made it clear, crystal clear. I'm yet to hear Rafi Dev, the PPP, Freddie Kesuna, many of the Indian elements come out and consistently saying that they are against Indian domination. We have been making it clear from 92, if you want to start from 92, that we are against, okay, racial domination and African domination. And I remember when the WPA was formed, after the 1973 elections, which every observer, including ourselves, came to the view that it was one of the most blatantly rigged elections. And we criticized the PNC and Burnham on those elections. And we were in Askria then. And we made a very important statement. We said, in a nutshell, that we regret that there is not an Indian group in the Indian community that was willing to criticize the Indian leadership as we were doing to the African leadership. Brother Moses Bhagwan had returned to the country after studying law. And he had begun work with some young Indians, and they had formed a group called the Indian Political Revolutionary Associates. And when he saw the Askria statement, contact was made with Askria, and a working relationship developed between Askria and IPRA, with a clear intention to address the racial problem in the country. And we announced that we're going to set up a race commission that will go into the villages, the African and Indian villages, communities, and discuss with people openly the racial problem in order to get a sense where people stand on this problem and to get an indication where they wish to go. And any scholar or every young person interested in the history could go and check the papers. The response of both the PPP and the PNC was that the racists come together. The PPP see Bhagwan as a racist because you oppose the PPP and Jagan, and the PNC see Askria and Koyan as a racist because we oppose them. And the headline was, the racists come together. But anyhow, Askria and IPRA went into the community and we had a number of meetings. And at the end of the process, we came out of that process convinced that the masses of African and Indians, having recognized the problem, they wish to find a solution that is workable and in the best interest of the country. And it is out of that logic and that groundings with the community give birth to the WP. I say all of this to show that the WPA from its inception accept the racial problem as a challenge. We never play games with the racial problem. When we began to work with Chedi Jagan against the PNC, Jagan tell me we must keep meetings in the African areas. We mustn't keep meetings in the Indian areas. They got the Indians under control. Who we need to get to the struggle is Africans. So he wanted us to carry he and the PPP into the African community, give them an audience, but he didn't want African activists to be exposed to Indian community.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we were dealing with, where these parties see their hold on the ethnic community as important to their politics, was always being driven. The PPP and Jagan politics after the split, and even before the split, was driven by the understanding that the party, okay, need to protect Indian interests and to take advantage of the Indian majority vote. The African Party was always driven by the fact that its survival depends upon African vote. But what, unlike the PPP, where history and culture have made the PPP don't make a distinction between Indian interests and national interests. They see Indian interests as part of the national interest. And I remember when we we used to visit, we had visitors from comrades from Cubans. And one of the worrying things the Cubans had with the PPP is that every meeting that they come to and they're being exposed to PPP people is poor Indians. And it was very worrying. In a multi-ethnic society, you call yourself Marxist, Leninist, working class, but all you could deliver is an ethnic audience. And we saw the same thing when the PNC began to embrace the Eastern Europeans and the Cubans and so. What they were delivering to the theater is a set of African people. And I remember when we went to the Festival of Youth and Students as a United Guyana delegation, we fought in the streets of Cuba for who can carry the Guyana flag. And eventually the Cubans had to separate us in different buses. But the point I'm trying to make is that the ethnic problem have always been foremost in front of us. And we have deliberately, our leaderships have deliberately decided to pretend that it doesn't exist, when in fact they calculate their politics based upon it. And I don't buy into the idea that Guyanese have ever become a society driven by the love for democracy. I don't buy into it. Even though I accept that in fundamental terms, the Africans who fought to put an end to slavery and to bring back African humanity and Guyanese humanity into the equation have struck the first set of blows for modern democracy in Guyana. I don't believe that Guyanese as a nation, African Indians and Amerindians, have embraced, and understand and digest what democracy means. Because democracy doesn't mean elections. Elections is just one part of democracy. But when you discuss Guyana and democracy reduces the elections. So I don't buy into this argument about the importance of democracy, except it deals with the fundamental challenges posed to us by history. When we begin to see that the Amerindians, even though their numbers are small in political terms, they must get equal power like African and Amerindians, and the equation is not an election equation, and it's not a number equation. Then you're talking democracy for me. But don't tell me about voting. While I understand the importance of voting, it is for me not the essence of democracy. And I think there's where we in ASCRIA had understood those fundamentals. And I think generally in the WPA, there's where we differ from most of the political parties. While we forced by the logic of the society to embrace the so-called democracy struggle based upon the winner-take-all system, but fundamentally rooted in our political consciousness is to upturn that notion and to create conditions for a genuine meeting of minds of Guyanese people and refashioning the society based upon the principle of equality, parity, and non-domination.
Takumo Gunse there, WPA executive member, laying it out. It's his own conception and his own perception and WPA's perception. And I'm going to try to make this program a regular program to bring, I bring on, as you all know, lots of PNC people and so on. And I deliberately have not populated this program with WPA people because I don't want to exclude people. So it's not a WPA program, although they host this WPA. You know, myself and Brother Kilaki wanted to set a new standard for the country where you can be partisan, but you generate a general national discourse. You do not by locating your party at every twist and turn. And those of you who have supported the WPA here have made that criticism of myself in not bringing on WPA people. It's obviously here tonight. You're hearing a different kind of perspective on the problems of our country, and that is okay because there are different tendencies inside of our country. Among African Guyanese and Indian Guyanese, there are different tendencies, different worldview, and sometimes we need to appreciate our diversity. Kilaki Amsterdam, the race question and where you find yourself in that discourse, where the WPA finds itself in that discourse, and what are you learning from this discourse on race since 2020?
Again, 2020. I have to go back to 1992 and pre-1992 because, like you've established, the WPA from its inception has been "quote unquote" multiracial.
Multiracial in its approach, not ideology, because there's no ideology called multiracial.
Yeah. Multiracial in its approach because the WPA fought, as I like to say, a black government in representation or in trying to get equality and fairness for the Indo-Guyanese. And after the 1992 elections, that multiracial construct of the WPA, we see it quite frankly, from my vantage point, my point of view, it started deteriorating or disintegrating. All the or the majority of the Indian brothers and sisters that were in that fight with the WPA gradually disappeared from the face of the WPA. The question is, where did they go? Did they become PPPites? Did they become Jagonites? Or they simply withdrew from the public eye in terms of dealing with the politics of the country? Because by that time, the PPP was in power. An Indian-dominated political party was in power. And that Indian-dominated political party was now, in my mind, creating for the society the very problems which the WPA fought against when it was the PNC in power. And so when we come to 2020, right? When we come to 2020, we have a situation where you have an Indian-dominated government misbehaving, and misbehaving worse, in my mind, than the African-dominated government of the 80s into the 90s. But you cannot find the Indo-Guyanese, like Asquith said back then, to chastise this Indian-dominated government for the wrongs. And if you look at it from the wider societal point of view, you see it happening. And when you look at the WPA, how did that affect the WPA? In short, the disappearance of those Indian brothers and sisters from the face of the WPA, like you said, the young people will get the impression that the WPA is a quote-unquote black people party. And so when the WPA representative talk about the problems African Guyanese are having with this Indo-dominated government, we are labeled racist. But the reality is, from 1992 all the way into this 2020 elections, right? The problem which has now been confronted, and that is the separation of the ethnic groups in this country, the separation of the races, if we call it that. that has never really been addressed. And so, like those of us who say Guyana is not a nation, Guyana is a landmass occupied by different sets of people, different ethnicities. That very concept is showing itself on a daily basis in the WPA. And so when people say David Hines is racist, Takuma Ogon says racist, Kidaki Amsterdam is racist, because they're talking about Black people issues, because it is Black people who are being dominated by an Indo-Guyanese dominated government. Those who don't know the history of the WPA and perhaps the history of the struggles of the WPA and the history of the country will quickly buy into that. But the reality is, in my mind, WPA remains the political party of the past with the same ideology, and that is no ethnic group should dominate the other, and citizens of this country have a right to enjoy the resources equally and fairly. And so the 2020 elections, again, has brought right up there, in your face, as we like to say, the issue of race, racial discrimination, backward, up and jat. Where are the Indo-Guyanese to stand up in defense of what is right as against what is wrong, and say to the PPP, you are doing wrong by this society and you need to correct your ways? Where are the Indo-Guyanese who were once present in the WPA, rubbing shoulders with these African Guyanese brothers to confront a government of the past that was doing perhaps similar things as this government? And so that is where, that is the impact, I would say. That is what the 2020 election has really exposed. That with oil money, access to oil money, with political power, controlled by the PPP and Indo-Guyanese dominated government, the Indo-Guyanese who were once seen as championing a cause in this society have simply, in my mind, gone back to their natural homes, the PPP, or in the ethnic enclaves of being Indo-Guyanese.
And of course, Africans, by that very logic, have also gone back to their homes. And that is the nature of our politics. There are those of us who try to navigate the politics. And some people feel that you can only be multiracial if you do not defend the interests of an ethnic group. When our position is that there were times when the Indian Guyanese community felt that they were under attack, and the WPA, its Indian leadership and membership, and its African leadership and membership defended the Indian people. We didn't ask them to prove that they were under assault. We didn't ask them to prove that they felt oppressed. We defended them. And today, we are defending Africans who are saying that they're under attack, who are saying they're under oppressed, and they're asking us to ask them, where is the evidence? When Indian Guyanese say, you take away flour from us so we can't make roti. We didn't ask them to prove. Of course, we knew that wheat flour made bread also, that African people had. The matter here is that we stood by Indians when they were under attack, when it was perceived or real. And today, African Guyanese are under attack. Whether it's perceived or real, we will stand it. That's the cornerstone of consistent politics. But people want to start history at a certain time. Forget the history that went down here just 10 years ago. 10 years ago. We're not going anywhere. We're not folding up. They would like us to go away. We're not going away. The WPA is here because we feel we have a higher cause and a higher calling. And that higher calling is always when the society is about to shoot itself in the head to take the gun away from this society. And we feel this society is about to shoot itself in the head. It has been trying to do so from 2020. And we in the Working People's Alliance feel that we have to take gun away and give ourselves another chance. Another chance. We are not yet patient. We have a lot of work to do. We are fighting against the odds. It's a difficult society. But whenever this society, whether it was in the Rodney days, whether it was in the 60s when Guyana came up with the joint premiership, saying share or else we're going to blow up, or whether it's now, when we are standing in between this country shooting itself up in the air and dying and ignoble death, we have to stand up. It's a hell of a job because you'll be cursed by both sides. But every society needs its radical strain to be there to keep the society from disintegrating. 30 seconds, Brother Takuma. 30 seconds, Brother Kidaki. Because
we really have to have an extended discussion on these matters. Because one of the things about there's a lot of profound dishonesty on the question of race, and there's a lot of dishonesty about the WPA's position. You cannot have a democracy when the WPA has been deliberately excluded from the press. You know, I mean, the WPA views are not allowed in the mainstream media to compete with the other views. So, you know, I mean, from the very basic fundamental. But since I only have 30 seconds, and I probably use 15 of it already, I want to say to your viewers that we in the WPA take our responsibility serious. We have comrades who lost their life in this struggle. We have our comrades who sit down for years in jail for this struggle. And for us, our commitment to the Guyanese nation, our commitment to our ethnic communities is not a jokey matter. My commitment to the African community is not a jokey matter for me. It's a serious matter. My embrace of the Indian, the Amerindian community is not a jokey matter for me. I am alive today because of an Indian man. I remember as a young youth in St. Ambrose School coming through the grounds by, you know, from Alberton, the various grounds, jumping over a fence, and a alien foot jump into my foot and create a cut that is like a mouth. And African people in the cars, I remember as a youth man, I hustled into Region Market to my mother. Watch me on my foot and shake the head. They put me in the car. And the Indian man on a big bang bicycle, when he see me, he said, "Boy, we're going to the market to my mother." He said, "You can't make it, you're going to make it to the market." He put me on the bicycle. And he ride me and drop me to the Georgetown Hospital, emergency surgery, 24 stitches. And my mother make contact with the man who used to live in Liliendal. Then black people say, "Here you going to?" The Indian man run black people out the yard with cutlass during the race time. But a couple months after, when he see an African child, Takuma Gonse, bleeding to death, when Africans in their motor cars, I remember it, watch me turn their face, refuse to do anything. That Indian man, who black people accuse of being racial, put me on the bicycle. Georgetown Hospital, emergency surgeon. Today, Takuma Gonse could be speaking to the nation. So I can't be racial. And I go want to stop there. No, but we need more time to discuss this problem.
And we will get more time. As I said, I want to make this a more regular occurrence. Iraqi Amsterdam, 25 seconds.
Well, listen, I endorse everything Takuma said, basically. We can be racist and we can be racial. because, like I said, we have been in this struggle when the boots were on the other foot, right? And we simply are continuing that struggle. We're struggling for human decency and fairness in this society. It's not a race struggle. It's a struggle for right and wrong. And I hope, like I said previously, our Indian brothers and sisters will recognize this as not a fight against a race, but a fight against a system. It so happens that the people dominating that system right now, that apartheid system, are predominantly Indo-Guyanese.
Thank you very much, Kidaki Amsterdam. Thank you very much, our brother Takuma Ogunse, for coming on here tonight. A program with a difference, Politics 101. And I want to thank you all for staying with us. It has been quite riveting here in terms of the kind of information and analysis that you're bringing here on the problems that we face. I'm happy to do it because that's part of the struggle. Tomorrow night, we're going to lend some solidarity to our brother Rickford Burke. We're going to be dealing with his issue and what that signifies. What does it signify? Some people have said this government is petty. Some have said the government has gone crazy. It's all of those things. But all of those things are part of a logic of domination, part of a logic of domination. Tomorrow night, Rickford Burke's situation in its larger perspective. See you then. And as always, remember, love is our watchword. I love you.